All right,
Hi,
guys,
good
you're on.
afternoon, good evening. My name's Andrew Sitz. I'm joined with James Bartlett and Matthias Thierbach. I hope I didn't blast your name too bad there, Matthias. But
That was pretty good.
yeah, it's an exciting time. Just that we have people from all over the world joining Iowa in our meetup group. And today's topic is going to be extremely exciting because if you've been in the Power BI space for any period of time, you've likely come into issues with how to co-develop with uh, your coworkers, collaborators inside of your business or whatever project you're working on. So, without any further ado, don't want to hold things up from getting to go, other than to note that we had some initial technical difficulties. So, please use the updated links that we've provided. And I'm hoping that you already have if you're watching the stream right now. And without further ado, we'll go ahead and get started.
All right, Matthias, it's all to you, bud.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks, Andrew. We just had some very exciting 5 to 10 minutes here trying to resurrect the network connection. Um, uh, Thanks for having me. Super excited about this opportunity. And as you say, talking about what we're discussing here, source control in the Power BI world, that is something which is always pretty hot because it's been such a massive pain point in Power BI for such a long time. So let me just introduce myself quickly to anyone who doesn't know me, and then we'll go from there. You can see my screen. So just a few bullet points here. I'm currently working for YouGov in London, well, international market research and data company. I'm heading up finance systems here, so I've actually got a very interesting job because I'm a technologist in finance, which is basically what Power BI is all about. Prior to moving into finance, I've been working as a software architect, um, and always on Microsoft stacks, getting to over 17 years now altogether. And interestingly, even before going into Power BI, CI/CD and DevOps and deployment automation has always been a core interest and topic of mine. So that's pretty much how PBI Tools came about and the topic we want to talk about today. I've got Twitter, LinkedIn, my blog, my website. It's all here. Twitter is sort of where I prefer to hang out the most. So if you want to be kept up to date with what's going on around source control and what I'm working on, definitely follow me on Twitter. What I want to do today, want to talk about what PBI Tools is, a little bit where it's come from, what it does, give you some demos to effectively show off what it does end to end, but also provide some space for Q&A towards the end. And hope we can, move to a fairly interactive session at that point. What I wanted to start off with is something fairly current, actually. So I'm just going to switch to my browser here, and I'm going to switch to a tweet that I found just a few hours ago. So this is super hot. There was a very intense and active discussion going on earlier today. Marco Russo was involved, Chris, various other people, specifically talking about our topic. So basically, it got all triggered by someone talking about Christian Wade, who did a live stream yesterday and actually extensively talked about desktop hardening. I can definitely. I was live on that stream as well. I mean, I was watching it. So I can definitely recommend it. And so a pretty lengthy discussion came out of that. Marco saying some things here, and then Chris sort of summing things up very nicely. Do we have a roadmap for those desktop hardening topics? Where does DevOps, Git integration, and pro dev tools sit? And I thought I'd put that out here because that's quite literally what I'm talking about today. And those gaps, which people get really worked up about, I've felt them myself years ago, and basically started developing my own solution for it. So just going back to here. Oops, sorry, wrong key. PBI Tools is an open source project which I started originally some 6 years ago. It only became public and open source half a year ago, back in October last year. So it's had quite a long time in private, if you will. The core idea really was, how can I actually take a PBIX file and effectively turn it into a development project, put it into source control, enable team collaboration, ultimately actually enable fully automated CI/CD. That's the sort of stuff I was used to from before I came into the Power BI space, when I was working on software projects. And suddenly none of those tools were available. Certainly not 5 or 6 years ago, but sadly enough, even not nowadays. So PBI Tools basically defines a folder structure which represents everything that's in a PBIX file, a structure that is optimized for source control, which allows good collaboration in terms of merging things, but which also allows understanding what all the parts defining a report or a data model actually mean. It currently exists as a command line tool, so it's relatively difficult, unfortunately, to get started with it. However, putting a proper GUI in place is something which I'm actively working on, and hopefully we'll have that in place within 2 months or so. So that's one aspect of PBI Tools. The other aspect is deployments. So once we have things in source control, as I mentioned before, we can think about automation, and most importantly, automatically deploy things into different environments without having to publish manually. I did a little chart to indicate the various pillars that PBI Tools touches, and I promise this is the last slide. We're going to go into demos afterwards, but just to provide some context here and to visualize the concept behind it. So the idea is, on the left-hand side, we develop using tools like Power BI Desktop, Tabular Editor, DAX Studio, where ultimately we end up with a PBIX file or a BIM file in case of a tabular model. We then extract or decompose that into smaller pieces and put it into source control. So that's the bit in the center. The format I came up with for that, I call PBIX Proj. Anyone who's sort of from a development background and has done a bit of .NET development, they know there's CS Proj and VB Proj and whatnot. So that's sort of the inspiration here. So PBIX Proj, whenever you see that or whenever I talk about that, it basically means the source control representation of a PBIX file. So that's why we're in Git, and that's why we use tools like VS Code or GitHub, Azure repos, GitLab, anything that's Git enabled, basically. Obviously here we can go back and forth, right? So we can use feature branches. We can go back to certain versions and can actually push things back to the left side where we do development, or we go to the right side, deployment, right? We've got our sources in our Git repo, and now PBI Tools takes care of recompiling it back into deployable artifacts and then sending it into Power BI Workspace or even Azure Analysis Services in case of a model. So that's the overall idea here. Basically, making our source control system the truth when it comes to our development projects, rather than individual items or things that happen to be in production, right? If I just show you those few points, this is what I'm about to show you now. A very basic workflow, and you can get super sophisticated here, but I want to keep it simple for today. A very basic workflow would be something like this. You've got a PBIX project already in source control. You open it up to do further work on it in Power BI Desktop. What you then do is to start PBI Tools in what I call watch mode, where PBI Tools will basically connect to your Power BI Desktop session. And every time you click Save within Power BI Desktop, it will extract the internal definitions, allowing you to actually see the small incremental changes you've made and how they are reflected in the internal code files, which also allows you to actually then create very meaningful commits if you do those incrementally. And so I'll show that in a second. If you're done with your work, you close Power BI Desktop, PBI Tools will finish automatically. You push things into your repo, GitHub, Azure, wherever, and then your CI/CD pipeline kicks off and deploys things. So I'm going to show that. There are various ways of making this way more sophisticated, but that's probably another talk, to be honest. So I'm going to switch over to, where's my power? Here. Right. So Power BI Desktop, I've got here. I've got a very simple report loaded. In fact, that's one which I stole from SQLBI.com because they've got it as a demo PBX file there. It's got it's connected. It's got a live connection. Can I show this? Here we go. There we go. So it's got a live connection. Dataset is got introducing calculation groups. Again, that's just from SQL BI. That report is already in source control. We're going to see that in a second. So I'm just going to do what I said I was going to do. First thing is start PBI Tools to go in watch mode. So I've got VS Code open here. There we go. Just gonna clear that. This is the report I've got open, report1.pbix in that particular folder. What I need to do first is to run PBI Tools info.
Mathias, I'm going to jump in here just really briefly here. Producer Michael, behind the scenes here from Power BI Tips, I'm going to jump in. If you're running code pieces, if you wouldn't mind, can you zoom in just a little bit more on the screen? If you can make those just a tad bit bigger while you're writing code pieces, it's coming up small on the screen. I think Control Plus on your Studio Code will make that a little bit larger for you.
Even in the terminal?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Well, there we go.
It does the whole thing.
I didn't know that.
So
awesome.
Very
cool.
That'll help us see that. Okay, awesome. Appreciate it. And I'll catch you. If there's any more zoom in things, I'll make sure you know.
Is that large enough now, or should I go any further?
If you can maybe go one more, if you don't mind.
Okay. Control Plus.
Yeah, one more.
There we go. Always learning.
There we go. I think this is good enough. This will be good to read. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Back to you.
I've definitely had that sort of feedback before. Just didn't know what you could do here. All right, cool. So just to recap, I did PBI Tools Info, and that one gives me some metadata about my current environment, including all running Power BI sessions. And the one piece I want from here is the process ID from that. Once again, I do appreciate this is very hacky and sort of involved. Stay tuned. You know, a proper nice user interface is coming. It's just a lot of work, and you know, I've just got my 10 fingers here. So what I'm going to do is PBI Tools extract -PID for process ID, and then I'm going to put 4520 there, and I'm going to say -watch. And given that PBI Tools knows where my file sits, you can see that down here, PBIX path, right? It's basically now watching and just looking for any changes that occur on that file. So let's change something. It could be as simple as me changing this particular slicer. So I'm switching it to 2010, and hopefully don't have any network problem. Yeah, there we go. If I now, in fact, this is going to be so fast. I'm gonna make this a little smaller so we can actually see what's happening behind the scenes. So if I now click save, you can see that within a second or so, this thing, there we go. This is now picking up. I've saved the file. I've made some changes. and done, right? So it's now extracted, you know, the latest snapshot, if you will, because my file is already in source control. I can take advantage of the diff view which VS Code has for me, and there we go. Now I can see that one change has resulted in 3 files being changed. I know that the key change is going to be in here, and it's, look at this, right? It's literally what you would expect. Yes. I had a slicer on 09, and now I've got my slicer on 010. It also means, given that I can see those changes in such a granular way, I can think ahead and actually think about nice automation scenarios in the future, which are enabled here. But let's not get overexcited. So I've made that change. The other thing that's changed is obviously March edition of Power BI Desktop came out yesterday. Of course, I upgraded straight away. We can see that in the metadata here, right? So that's a one-off change, which would only have happened because of that. And then this one is a PBI procs specific metadata file. That one is really just you know, for sort of internal tracking purposes. And every time you extract, it will update this last modified timestamp. So what I can do now, you know, I talked about meaningful and granular commits. I can actually state this one and can say Power BI Desktop upgrade, and then I can do the same thing for my slicer change. Here we go, and change slicer. There we go. I'm not going to commit the timestamp change. I'm just going to ignore that because, again, that will be updated every single time I click save, and that would be quite verbose. I've had some feedback about that. Some folks don't like this and want to have a way of actually disabling those timestamps because, I mean, I can definitely understand that. So I'm considering actually making that an option moving forward. Let's do another change, maybe something a little more involved. Yeah, Power BI Desktop is not great when it comes to resizing. So what else could we do? I like playing around with colors. If you've seen previous demos from me, you've probably noticed that. So I'm just going to give this a blue background color. Here we go. Not pretty, but at least it's very visible. Same thing, clicking save, then we're going to see here, stuff is already happening, right? So straight away, if I then go into my div view, how many files do you reckon will have changed this time? Literally one. So this is a page level config file. We can see that here. So section is the internal name for page. This is my sales by month page. And the page now has a config setting for the background object. The color property, as well as the transparency property, has changed. So whilst this is quite verbose in terms of the JSON, it usually is also quite easy to follow. Also, we can see that we're not, we don't have a hex code for the color here. We're actually referencing a color from our theme, which means that color will change whenever I update my theme. So there we go. We're going to do the same thing now. Say changed background.
While Mathias is entering his comment there, I'm going to say, if you don't know this is freaking incredible, you better like go give Mathias some kudos to this on Twitter or wherever, on LinkedIn. Give him some claps for this. Holy smokes. This is what we've really been asking for in Power BI Desktop. This is unwinding the entirety of the inside of the file. This is like, you guys can't see me over here, but I'm like out of my chair beaming on my side thinking, this is so good. Yeah. What have where has this been all my life? Like, this is absolutely incredible. And the fact that you're having it listen to changes in the file is also incredible. And this is, wow, this is just miles ahead of what I'm used to having to work with these things. This is really, really cutting edge stuff. I really like this.
Cool, awesome, appreciate it.
We had one question that seemed like it was kind of relevant to
okay,
what we're doing right now, and this is coming from Ms. Belinda Allen on YouTube, and the question is, how are the version numbers created? Is it just do you write them yourself, or is it just incremental?
Version numbers of what? Is this about your versioning your own work, or any of the numbers we've looked at?
The question says, so I was typing in the chat, version numbers were created how?
So this is all Git controlled. So there is no version number technically associated with this. This is looking at the PBX file, decompressing it, and then the decompressed version of that is all checked into GitHub. So everything versioning what you're, again, this would be kind of a bit of a GitHub 101 or, source code 101, right? When you commit a change to something, there's a, master branch, or there's a master library of all the code piles, the code we're looking at. And so technically in this version, we're not versioning anything. There's nothing versioning here. All we're doing is saying, rip apart the PBIX file, look at the pieces of it. And then what Mathias is doing here is when he's doing these commits in Visual Studio Code, we're actually just saying we're changing this file, and those changes of individual files are being pushed into a library where the final output is. I think that maybe it's the distinction there, because technically there's no versioning happening.
To the question, she said that she saw a version number in JSON. It was where we had the change in months.
Oh, the file, that's the monthly increment of the file. Yes. You don't have to do that. That's automatic.
Yeah. Okay, understood.
I saw V11 for both March and February. So
yes, so that was report metadata, presumably this one. That is generated by Power BI Desktop.
Yes.
Right, and because I had last saved that file with the February version, so we had 22.2 in there. And then just now, I made my very first change with the new March version that actually got upgraded. It's really just a piece of metadata. It doesn't mean very much, I think.
But to Belinda's question there a little bit more, every file you look at here, every single one of these are all generated by Power BI Desktop, right?
Yeah.
Nothing in here is being generated by this tool. This tool is only looking at everything that Power BI. So that version 11 that you may have seen, or anything, this one has a version 5 at the top of this list. All that information is purely directly from Power BI Desktop. None of this is being generated by PBI Tools.
Correct. However, what PBI Tools does is it actually restructures the content in a way that makes it more readable, more accessible, and actually makes it easier to track changes. So, for instance, looking at the report subfolder here, which we've seen a little bit earlier when we started making changes, it hopefully has a very logical structure, right? So we've got a folder for each page, and then within each page, we actually have a folder for each visual, and each visual then has various JSON files describing data connection, as in fields and config properties, etc., and filters, right? So that folder structure is what PBI Tools does, and it's conceptually very similar to save to folder in Tabular Editor, right? If you've worked with Tabular Editor before, a model is defined in one single JSON file, which can be absolutely gigantic, right? And it's not great for collaborative working. Tabular Editor does save to folder. It splits it out into individual components and subfolders, and that conceptually is precisely what I'm doing here when it comes to reports and other parts of the file. So let me fast forward a little bit. I've now I've committed 2 changes already. I haven't pushed anything out yet. So let me show you what that currently looks like in Power BI. So I've got a deployment pipeline set up to this particular Power BI workspace, and report 1 is actually the file that's currently sitting there, and as you can see, that's the original unmodified version. No background color. I still have 09 in my slicer setting here. So that's what I currently have in Power BI, right? If I now go back to VS Code and say, please push my changes. There we go. We can see a little spinner happening here. There we go. That's done. I mean, it's not very informative, but it started spinning. So this got pushed up into GitHub. That's where I'm hosting the repo. So let's check out what that looks like in GitHub. It would be this one here. If I and by the way, this is a public repo. You can go in here and see all of that and check it out. Look at this, 7 minutes ago, change background color with a nice typo. And look at this down here. It says environments development in progress, right? So if I click on the development environment, I can see that a minute ago, that was deployed. So if I go back to Power BI and refresh, I'm going to see my nice, there we go. I've got my blue background color. I've got my slicer changed to 2010. So even though I haven't even left Power BI Desktop, even though I'm still sort of actively making changes here, because I've actually committed some of those changes already straight into GitHub. And because I've got this deployment pipeline set up, it's already here, right? So let me show you what that actually looks like in terms of GitHub. So here we go. So again, we've got deployments here. If I click on this hyperlink, it's gonna show me the history for the GitHub Actions CI/CD job, which just ran. And as you can see, this took 16 seconds, right? So the whole thing is actually super fast and performant, particularly when it comes to just thin reports. And basically, there are a bunch of steps going on here. This is the key one we're interested in. It basically said it found one source folder to deploy. It's then creating a report one.pbx file, and it so generates various things. It resolves the workspace ID, and then basically imports it. And that's all done, right? In fact, I even have a clickable hyperlink here. So in my GitHub action log, I can actually go and click straight into that report. I'm not going to do that now because this browser would actually go to a different tenant, so that won't work, which is why I'm using a different browser there. But if I were using the same browser here, I would basically see that same report. Now, that looks all pretty complicated, but let me show you what's actually needed to get there, because it's super simple. So going back here, and if I remove, look at that. So even with my, well, just I'm almost able to fit it on one screen, even with my very large font size now. This is my GitHub Action CI/CD file, and in fact, there's a lot of stuff in here which I could actually remove, and it would still work very nicely. So what am I doing here? So I've got a job defined, which I'm calling deployment. This is running on Ubuntu. Here I'm specifying my environment. So remember when I on my GitHub landing page, when I saw development in progress, that's where that's coming from. And here, this is actually where the cool stuff's happening. PBI Tools, as of last week, as of the day before SQL Bits, is available as a Docker image, which means setting up those CI/CD pipelines is now incredibly easier, way more easier, because you no longer have to worry about how to actually retrieve the sources for PBI Tools and make that available in GitHub. You literally just reference the image, which is hosted on GitHub. So GHCR is the GitHub Container Registry. That's a public image, and that's how you actually bring PBI Tools in here. So all we then do is effectively this one here, PBI Tools deploy, and the profile I'm referencing here as a variable is defined here. That's called all reports. So how does PBI Tools deploy know what to do? There's a concept here which I call deployment manifest, and that is basically held in here. Also relatively straightforward, as you can see. The definition for what my deployment does and how it works is all held in code, right? And it's part of my repository. I don't even need to go into my CI/CD server separately to configure something, and then without being able to easily replicate it somewhere else. This file defines the deployment. I can copy paste that, run it somewhere else. I can even run it on my own machine. I don't even rely on GitHub Actions or Azure DevOps. And what am I doing in here? So basically, all reports, that's a profile name. You can have any number of those. And remember, we referenced that in the YAML file. And it says, this is a report deployment. The source for it is to be found in folders. And I've got a wildcard reference here. So this is basically saying, find any folder. So this is the wildcard here. Find any folder that's nested within a subfolder, right? So it sounds a bit complicated, but when you look here, you actually see what I mean, right? So basically, reports DevOps tutorial is a subfolder right at the top, and then report one is nested within it. So it basically finds report one, but it will also then take the name of the parent folder and make that a parameter. And you can see down here, I can now reference the target workspace name in relation to my file system. So if you think about that, it means I could have any number of folders here, whatever the folder is called then maps to a workspace in my Power BI tenant, right? Without me having to hard code any of that. I'm specifying a service principal authentication here. Obviously, no secrets will be leaked, right? So this is a variable reference. So this is not the actual secret. Using the percentage signs means that I'm referencing a variable which is defined in this particular case in settings for my GitHub repo. If I go to secrets and actions, here we go. That's it. I've got a repository secret. It's called PBI client secret. And going back here, PBI client secret, same reference. That's how it gets injected there, completely securely. It's never going to be leaked. And I don't have to worry about it. And that's it. That's basically defining the deployment logic. That's hooking it up with GitHub Actions. Again, ultimately, it's just this one single command here. Everything else is basically just giving me some metadata info, which is good for troubleshooting. That is sort of 80% of what I was showing earlier. Let me wrap this up with one final step, and then we can move over to the Q&A, if that's okay. Because I haven't shown the compilation yet. So obviously so first of all, just to clarify, I've got my PBX file in here, right? But you can see it's grayed out. So it's not actually part of my Git repo. It's being ignored by Git. If I go to GitHub and look at the files inside here and go here, you can see there is no PBX file, right? I've only committed the sources, which means in order to then deploy something, the CI/CD job actually had to regenerate that PBX file. So I'm just going to show what that looks like if you wanted to do it manually. And I'm just going to grab this and basically go here and let me go here and let me do git clone. So I'm just going to clone this from scratch just so you can all see there's no magic going on here. This is there we go, got that. If I then go into this, so this whoops, typo. Right, so this is freshly cloned straight from GitHub. If I open this in VS Code, I'm going to see there is no PBX file in here. And yes, I do trust myself. Right, so no PBX file. And if I then open a terminal here and go into the subfolder, I can now do PBI Tools compile. And all I need to do is to reference the report one subfolder. Simple as that. It's reading all the files, and bam, it's now created. Here we go. Now I've got my PBX file, and it's still grayed out because it's actually in the Git metadata that those files should always be ignored. So I don't have to replicate that. So just to prove that that's actually working, if I now go here and do browse reports and open my fresh file, so I put that into temp and this guy, Yep, here we go. So here, that's literally just now in my time zone. So let me open that. Obviously, it's happening on a different screen. Here we go. This is probably the most boring bit of the demo because it's gonna take what will feel like 5 minutes to start.
Oh, no. This is not boring at all. Everyone is feverishly chatting on the YouTube chat here about what the heck. This is so amazing. We want to watch it again. We need to see this again in slow-mo. Let's watch this again on half speed so we can understand what's going on. Everyone really is excited about the potential of this.
Very good. Yeah, I can't see that.
No, it's okay.
It's probably for the better.
A very good feedback.
All right.
Someone comments, he goes,
cool.
What? This is even possible? He's super excited. So very, very nice.
Right. So here we go. So this is the file I just created out of nothing. Well, not true. I've just created just from sources, right? And it's just loading the data, and here we go. So that's end to end, right? So if I and by the way, the same thing would easily and equally work for Azure DevOps. But I've done previous recordings where I've actually shown the whole Azure DevOps setup. I've never publicly demonstrated GitHub, so there we go. We've got both of them available now. So if I go back to my slides, here we go. So that's what we've done. So just to recap a little bit, PBI Tools does extract, and that's defined.
Mathias, we might have lost your audio on there. I believe the headphones might have winked out on there a bit. Yeah, he's pause. We'll take over here for a second here. So the headphones have run out of juice, so we're going to continue to pinch hit here for Mathias while he kind of gets new headphones going here. So just for everyone to know, this is a tool that goes alongside of Power BI. And so what you're seeing here on the screen right now is the PBI Tools.cli usage. So this is the ability to be able to extract things out of the PBI file. One thing I'll note here is there's probably, I think, James, we're going to need to task ourselves with doing some very simple tutorial videos. There's a lot of little components that are going on this. We saw running the tool. One thing that's important to note here as well, I believe this is an exe file that you have to put on your machine, and there's a certain way you have to kind of enable it and install it. So there's another part of this as well that will enable users to be able to install it. So James, we'll probably have to take some time and decompress this ourselves because this is exciting stuff. And we'll formulate some videos, some mini series around, okay, here's how to install it. Here's how to, uncompress a file. Here's some best practices on checking it in and moving over to GitHub. So we'll be able to kind of bolt those together for you. Yeah, exactly right. Short windows of video, and we'll bring the content to you in kind of digestible content as well. So while Mathias is kind of putting up his headset, are there any questions? And again, I'm going to encourage people for the...
Can you hear me?
Oh, we got you.
Yes.
I was going to just ask, if there are any questions, feel free to... Yep, we can hear you. Can you hear us?
I can't hear you, though.
Oh, okay.
Ugh, that's quite embarrassing. Sorry.
No worries. I also say we can hear you. I'll chat over there to you. Okay, no worries. But if you are online, feel free to give us more questions either on LinkedIn or YouTube. That's kind of where most of the questions come in from. And also, I just want to kind of point out here, the output of this show is, we're going to cut the YouTube stream here live in a little bit, but we will have a link here that I'll place into the chat windows of all the social media places, so we can do an after hours kind of party, hangout, talk about more things here in a little bit. Mathias, is your audio okay?
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Ugh, I'm so sorry.
No worries.
This is why you shouldn't use battery-powered
headphones.
I've learned my lesson now.
No
I'm
problem.
really sorry.
You're good to go.
Proudly flaunt the cable on my.
I do that. Yeah, I'm hardwired in as well, just to, just because.
I will never make that mistake again. I'm really
no
sorry.
problem.
I hope you don't get any feedback because
perfect.
I'm not actually okay.
It's really good.
Fantastic.
We're A-okay. No, we were able to. We were spitballing here a bit while you were getting your headset to go, so we're good to go.
Okay.
Back to you.
Yeah, I didn't catch any of that, by the way.
No worries. We just said amazing things, how much we love your project, nothing bad.
Cool. All right. I'm going to share the slide deck later. So I've basically just explained the key commands here: extract, compile, deploy. Not going to go through this again. I've got a slide around the structure of the deployment manifest, which I've already shown earlier. As you can see, there's a lot of flexibility here in you being able to parameterize parts of your folder structure, for instance. And this is the piece we alluded to briefly earlier, where I said, well, effectively, PBI Tools is just extracting what's in a PBX file, which is effectively just a zip file, but I think that's fairly common knowledge now. However, with additional enhancements, for readability. So I've taken a screenshot here. If you were to extract a PBX file as a zip file, you would basically get you would basically get something like this. But what you get from PBI Tools instead is actually a folder structure, which is much more comprehensive and semantic, if you will. So we've got that. Wanted just to say a few things about roadmap. I already mentioned GUI and having an external tool. So obviously, the one thing I had to do earlier, starting Power BI Desktop and then finding what's the process ID and then manually launching PBI Tools, that's something I really want to see as an external tool button, right? So stay tuned, and can't wait for the day when we can announce that. I've only shown PBIX deployments for now. What I'm actively working on right now, so even sort of before the external tool, is dataset deployments. So again, stay tuned. Within a month or so, I'm going to be able to do some sessions showing how to deploy into Power BI Premium and Azure Analysis Services for your datasets, and use the exact same niceties you've got in terms of a branching model and all of that. A few other things, they're not too relevant here. Those are really the two bits I wanted to highlight. And just in terms of resources, pbi.tools is the website for the tool. That's where you can find some documentation, download links, as well as any announcements. I don't have an awful lot of stuff on there right now. I wish I had more. So bear with me as I'm prioritizing docs writing. Cool. Do we have any questions?
We do. James, any questions from your side that you see?
Yeah, there was one that came up that I think both Mike and I tried to answer, and we got slightly different answers. And I wanted to actually get the authoritative answer from the source. The question was, can you track changes on the data model / Power Query level with PBI Tools?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm not sure we have enough time to demo that, but well, actually, let me show you that in a slightly different way. So if you go to GitHub and go to PBI Tools, so basically here, right? Obviously, the PBI Tools repo itself is pinned here, but then I've also got this one, AdventureWorks. So this is a demo repo which I actually put in place quite a long time ago, even before the whole project became publicly available. And what I've done here is I've taken an official Microsoft PBIX sample containing a data model, and I've converted it into the PBI Tools format, and so much so that I also converted the internal data sources. So what Microsoft gives you is basically a hydrated PBIX. So it's already got all the data in it. And when you look at the connection information, it links to some local SQL server, which no one would have, right? So I changed that and actually linked all the queries to publicly available CSV files. So which means you can actually take this repo, you can clone it, and if you then simply run this command, you will get a PBIT file with the same definition, which when you open it in Power BI Desktop, it will just hydrate automatically because those data sources are publicly available. So why am I saying that? Because it's a perfect example of actually showing what a data model looks like. One thing I've done here, which is different from Tabular Editor, I've actually extracted all M queries explicitly. So basically, each M expression that's behind any of our model tables comes up here as an M file. So if I go to product, for instance, I can see precisely what would show up in the what's it called, the advanced editor in Power Query, right? And so seeing this, you can then obviously imagine that if you were to make any changes there, it would equally show up in your Git history.
Awesome. This is a really good demo. I was not aware that it was able to pull apart a model file. Now, it's not retaining the data model, right? So in this case, when you're decompiling a file, you're decompiling the components that make up the data model. You're not actually storing the data that the model would absorb or live inside of the actual PBI file.
It's just the table of definitions.
It's just metadata.
Yep, that's fine. That works. Awesome. Super cool. Any other questions? I mean, everyone's you got massive claps here from people. They're asking about, seeing the M code, getting it out in an easy way. People are like loving that one. Lots of claps there. Super excited about that. People are also just confirming. They're asking a couple questions just to confirm that this is still working for both GitHub and Azure DevOps. This works with any Git, just to confirm, right?
It works with any Git.
Yep.
If you go to dev.azure.com/PBI Tools/samples. I've got a bunch of publicly available Azure DevOps repos. Again, I demoed those in a previous recording. I believe the one with Reed on the 28th of January. So there's a 1 hour recording about this. And if we go to this one, for instance, that's one I've upgraded just earlier this week to actually also use the new Docker container. When I set up those pipelines initially, I didn't have that yet. And you can see, there we go. This is beautiful because it's so simple and yet very powerful, right? So, well, I find it beautiful.
I would agree.
So basically, this is the core bit here, right? So I've got my job. In this case, it's a deployment job, which I call deploy. And then also we're running on Ubuntu, and we're referencing the container, which is the exact same reference. There's a little bit of syntax difference between Azure and GitHub, but conceptually is exactly the same. So it converting from one to the other is actually very simple. And as you can tell down here, at the end of the day, we're doing the same thing. So there's PBI tools, deploy. We've got a profile and an environment reference. If I then go to pipelines, and if I go to the most recent one, which ran on Tuesday, so just earlier this week, we can see an output that's very similar. So here the Docker container gets initialized. Here I'm running PBI Tools info. That's always very useful for debugging. It basically shows lots of metadata information about your environment. And then down here, PBI Tools deploy, you'll see effectively the exact same output we had in GitHub earlier, only on Azure, but also running on an Ubuntu host inside a Docker container.
Awesome. Other questions? Anything else, James, that you came across that we didn't answer yet?
I think that pretty much covers all the questions.
I saw
Andrew
some
had a
others
question in
on
chat.
LinkedIn. We got a few, and let me pull those up. So there was a more general question at the beginning, which I think it would be useful to cover, where Farouk said, "This is great. Would the Power BI XML endpoint render all of this irrelevant?" I think that is really a foundational question of like, this is something that's possible with the XMLA endpoint.
Well, XMLA endpoint does not publish reports. XMLA endpoint is just for the data model. So this is more of a report centric view of the world. So you kind of have to break this thing into two parts: data and reports, right? So what we're really focusing on here in this part of this is more, yes, this does capture the details of what that PBIX file would look like, right? The data model, the tables, the things, the relationships. That is XMLA point centric. But this is capturing way more than that. And again, you look at the tools that are out there today: Tabular Editor, DAX Studio, other tools that are out there are only touching just the data side of the Power BI world. This is touching both sides of the world. And that's why I think this is like, what the heck? This is so amazing, because this is the first time I've seen any tool that does any level of real decompiling of the PBX files in a reliable format. You can check in all the pieces of the code, bring them back down as a Git to your local machine, and re-stitch everything back into a PBX file. And so that's the power of what we're talking about here.
Yeah, and another component too on top of that would be the actual just pipelines component of the Power BI service as well, and its DevOps integration, how this could play into that, since there's obviously some commands that can be run on client side to do more automated updating or deploying or diverting back to a previous like a rollback essentially.
Well, are you referring to deployment pipelines or something else?
Right, the deployment pipelines themselves.
I mean, deployment pipelines are just a series of workspaces, and there's some automation, that magic that happens between different deployment pipelines. I mean, in this solution, what we're talking about here, right? This is what you would, again, Matthias, feel free to jump in here for your opinion on this as well. I'd feel like this would be a great solution for developing the files locally on my machine, and then when I'm building the DevOps integration, depending if you want to use deployment pipelines or not, you don't have to use them. This realistically could deploy two different workspaces, test, prod, whatever you want, programmatically. And you could say, when I'm going to master or main, I'm building that PBIX file, putting that PBX file in a certain environment for you. And that's what all the GitHub and the Git actions and what the DevOps can do for you. So you don't technically need deployment pipelines when you're looking at this kind of solution.
Also, to me, that's almost a philosophical question, if I can say it like that.
Yeah.
It's the difference between a file-centric approach as opposed to a repository-centric approach, right? And I very much want to use the latter.
Agreed.
Because that's basically what you got to have in an enterprise environment, or in any team environment, actually, right?
Yeah.
I want to, the key driver for me was, I don't want to have to deal with those black box files where I don't know what's inside, and where I don't know what's changed between two different versions, and where even if I had some sort of sophisticated way of archiving and versioning them, I would create a massive file system with hundreds and hundreds of megabytes, right? I want to be able to see it's also a question of about process, right? So this is not merely an interest in me sort of being keen on knowing what's going on inside. This is about how does this work, in a professional context, right? So as I mentioned before, I'm running a pretty sizable data management team in my company, right? And that's something I've been building up over the last 4 or 5 years. So as I added more people to that team, and as I sort of branched out in who does various pieces, I had to think about, well, how do we govern that, right? How do we ensure that that we can scale in terms of productivity, but at the same time, we don't have to compromise on quality. And for me, that comes with automation and process, right? So what we can do here is to actually have a very nice approval workflows in place where senior people only have permissions to approve changes to go into a higher environment, like UAT or production, and they can easily provide those approvals because they can see what's changed, right? And they can very easily see what's changed, without actually having to open files and like physically look what may be different, and then potentially even miss lots of things that aren't immediately visible, right? So that's really the underlying question here, and that's that's the pain I felt a few years ago, and where I feel we're in a much better situation now.
Awesome. With that one, I think we can. I think this is going to be a wrap. We're at a little bit after the hour. So what we're going to do is I will share some links here. So bear with everyone here. I'm going to put some links available to everyone who would be able to join the after hours. So it will be a Teams meeting. So if anyone who wants to join, you're more than welcome to. Here's the link there, and I'll give it to the gentleman here, James and team. The link's also in the chat window for us as well. And then I'll also place this on LinkedIn and everywhere else we can put it. So join the happy hour, and Mathias will join us here for a little bit. We'll just talk more about this. If you have more questions, if you want to talk philosophy of, code-based or file-based storage or repo-based storage, we can go a little more deeper on that one as well. James and Andrew, thank you very much for your user group leading this one. This has been an amazing event. Happy to help, that we can help out and contribute and display this to a wide audience. We really appreciate you guys as well. And Mathias, as always, we really appreciate your crazy knowledge drop and the work that you're putting on this one. This is absolutely phenomenal. And dare I say, it's a game changer. I think it is. Awesome.
Absolutely.
Thanks very much.
Thank you, everyone.
All right. See you all in Teams if you want.
Thank you.
See you there.
Bye.
All right. Thanks.